Bob Dylan rose to stardom virtually overnight, but it required a few very turbulent and taxing years to go by for the folk rock icon to feel like what he was doing was worth his time, and that he had the kind of control of his life and career he wanted. His journey, like that of so many other musical legends, took him down a rocky road complete with twists and turns and uncertainty. But eventually, he found his way. Before that, he almost called it quits, but thanks to one manic late-night writing sesh and some experimentation behind the piano keys, a whole generation was blessed with his definitive, career-defining hit, Like a Rolling Stone. Dylan very easily could have become an insignificant blip in musical history, but instead, he went on to become one of the most esteemed musical artists of all time. Dylan felt depleted by his music. Shortly after his 22nd birthday, Dylan dropped his second studio album, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. The record was historic in that it elevated Dylan out of the underground folk clubs of Greenwich Village and helped him find a wider national audience. His unique brand of political rock-folk fusion was unlike anything else available at the time. Through his candid, poetry-fueled music, Dylan established himself as a key player in the counterculture and civil rights movements. The American youth loved Dylan, but once he embarked on his tour in England in 1965, he became an international sensation as well. Even with all of this success, Dylan still felt like something was missing. The feeling of deep personal fulfillment was eluding him. That chapter of his life was complicated, to say the least. He got into a spat with Ed Sullivan and flaked on some of the biggest talk shows in America. He came under fire for being a dope smoker and for getting mouthy at some of his performances. And all of a sudden, he felt completely alienated from the folk scene that was such a critical piece of his personal identity. Even though he already had several hit singles like Blowin' in the Wind, The Times They Are A-Changin', and Subterranean Homesick Blues that charted well, Dylan wasn't sure he was really cut out to be a star. He missed the simpler times when he felt accepted in his community and wasn't accused of being a sellout. Dylan told Playboy back in 1966 he seriously considered calling it quits. He felt drained. He was singing songs he really didn't feel like singing and playing shows when he didn't want to. It was dragging his spirit down. The key takeaway from that interview was when Dylan reflected how it's, quote, very tiring having other people tell you they dig you when you yourself don't dig you. Yes, he was feeling disillusioned, and in the process, he felt like he was losing himself. The feeling really overtook him in the spring of 1965 when Dylan was wrapping up his tour of England. While in London, Dylan told his manager he intended on quitting. It didn't help his latest album, Bringing It All Back Home, was met with mixed reviews and stark criticism for straying from his folk roots by introducing an electric guitar and a backing band. You might recall this as the era when Dylan was disparagingly referred to as Judas by disgruntled fans who felt like he was betraying the folk community. By the way, if you're digging this video so far, make sure you show us some support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. And make sure you watch the whole video to find out not only how Bob Dylan came up with his hit song Like a Rolling Stone, but how he managed to score his first #1 chart-topping single just this year. Like a Rolling Stone wasn't supposed to be a song. After returning from England, Dylan took a step back from the demands of the public, seeking refuge in Woodstock, New York. He needed the time to sequester himself and put everything that came into his mind down on paper. He also needed the release of taking all his troubles and venting them through his poetic expression. For 10 hours, he furiously scribbled, transmuting his steady hatred for what his life had become, and the frustration he felt for losing himself into poetry. He never intended to write a song. According to interviews, Dylan recalls the document he produced in that writing session was 10 to 20 pages in length. In the spirit of Jack Kerouac's On the Road, Dylan had successfully captured one seamless yet lengthy stream of consciousness onto the pages of his notebook. At first he thought it would make a good intro for a novel or something, but then he was struck with a flash grenade of inspiration. He one day found himself sitting at his piano, grasping for inspiration, when he glanced at his notebook and read the words, "How does it feel?" It was as if he was suddenly struck by a lightning bolt of creativity. One moment he was shuffling through his writing, looking for suitable inspiration, and the next he was experiencing one of the biggest breakthroughs of his career. He immediately got to work and wrote the entire iconic song down in one session. Penning that song helped Bob rediscover his sense of purpose and passion. It helped realign his career's trajectory and reconnect himself to that inner source of creativity. Dylan had never written anything like that before. It came to him so suddenly. After finishing the song, he no longer wanted to write a novel or anything else. He just wanted to write songs. While Like a Rolling Stone wasn't quite as overtly political as some of Dylan's other songs, it did capture the sense of cynicism and revolutionary angst that defined the youth culture of the generation. The song's 4 verses dealt with a once prosperous and affluent princess that Dylan referred to as Miss Lonely, who experiences some kind of socioeconomic fall from grace. "You better take your diamond ring, you better pawn it, babe," Dylan admonishes, as if to say that further retribution was yet to befall her. Many have attempted to decipher who Miss Lonely might have represented. Some suggest it was former lover and fellow musician Joan Baez or actress Edie Sedgwick, with whom Dylan also had a brief relationship. Dylan loathed Andy Warhol's pretentious factory scene, and many of the people described in the song could very well be referencing that art collective. Dylan continued on with a backing band. Despite having very little history with the man, Dylan sent for blues guitarist Mike Bloomfield to come up to Woodstock to help him finish recording the song. At that point, the track was very raw and not even close to finished. It would require serious experimentation and rearrangement to get all the kinks worked out. Decades later, when the original handwritten lyrics were auctioned off for a record-setting $2 million, it was revealed many of the original lyrics were swapped out for other ones, and that the chorus was completely buried on the 4th page of notes. Bloomberg assumed Dylan had requested him to play the blues, seeing as that was his signature style. But when he got to Woodstock, Dylan told him he didn't want any of that B.B. King stuff. After being told that, Mike was at a loss, but continued to mess around with the song until he found a style that pleased him. Like a Rolling Stone went on to become Dylan's highest charting single up to that point. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Dylan credits the song for helping him revive his passion in music. He's even described the song in spiritual terms in some later interviews. He told the LA Times in 2004 that writing the song was a lot like a ghost had come and wrote it for him. "It gives you a song and it goes away," Dylan remarked. "You don't know what it means, except the ghost picked me to write that song." Dylan's first number 1 hit. We don't know what kind of magic he was tapping into when he wrote Like a Rolling Stone, but it seems Bob Dylan has still got it. In April of 2020, he earned his first ever number 1 Billboard hit with his delightfully subdued 17-minute concept track, Murder Most Foul. It was actually the first original song Dylan released in nearly 8 years. It was released March 27th and deals with the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. The song features Fiona Apple on piano. It unfolds slowly, but in addition to documenting the historic slaying of the 35th president, it describes the unfolding of the counterculture movement while giving shout-outs to all the era's most influential musicians, films, and pop culture references. Nielsen reported Murder Most Foul sold over 10,000 downloads in the first days it was available, and music mags like Pitchfork, NME, and Rolling Stone have included it on their Best of 2020 lists. Can you imagine if Dylan had thrown in the towel before writing Like a Rolling Stone? That's honestly an alternate reality we're not interested in seeing. Bob Dylan has had one of the most prestigious careers in music history. He sold more than 100 million records. He's received more awards than we have time to list. He's a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient and an inductee in both the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Oh yeah, he won a Nobel Prize for Literature as well. What's your personal favorite Dylan song? Tangled Up in Blue? Mr. Tambourine Man? Hurricane? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you take a second to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Tap the bell icon to turn on notifications so you can keep up with all our latest videos.